essentially a soft reboot of the entire game, reintroducing traditional dialogue trees and factions to restore Fallout's RPG identity. Early drafts of Fallout 1's ending allowed the Vault Dweller to take control of the Vault after defeating the Master. Developers cut it because they felt the story should emphasize exile and tragedy, not personal power. The boxing minigame in New Reno was inspired by real boxing legends of the 20th century. Writers inserted subtle references to fighters like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson into opponent styles and dialogue. 3 dogs rotating radio updates in Fallout 3 required a massive amount of conditional scripting. Bethesda said it was one of the hardest systems to implement because it had to track hundreds of player decisions dynamically. Automatron, the first Fallout 4 DLC, was written as a direct homage to cheesy 1950s sci-fi robot invasion stories. The mechanic's costume and dialogue were patterned on pulp comic villains. Vault Zero, the brain of the US war machine in Fallout Tactics, was originally meant to serve as a future hub for sequels. Interplay intended to make multiple spin-offs around Vault Zero's influence before the franchise changed hands. In Fallout 2, players could find talking two-headed Brahmin. This bizarre encounter was inserted by developers as a late-night joke, but made it into the final build. It's one of the strangest canon moments in Fallout. The Point Lookout DLC in Fallout 3 was intentionally disconnected from the Enclave plot. Bethesda designed it as a standalone survival horror experience to experiment with tone and storytelling variety. The Institute's secretive underground labs were modeled after Cold War-era fears of hidden government facilities like Cheyenne Mountain. Bethesda wanted them to feel like both a utopia and a nightmare, reflecting paranoia about technology. Mr. House, the reclusive tycoon controlling New Vegas, was heavily inspired by Howard Hughes. Like Hughes, Howe was obsessed with aviation, technology, and immortality, and became a hermit in his later life. The main Overseer NPC in Fallout 76 marked the first time Bethesda made a Vault Overseer central to a Fallout game story. This was done to emphasize the Overseer logs as a narrative tool. Shady Sands, a tiny town in Fallout 1, was expanded into the capital of the NCR in Fallout 2 simply because writers needed a base for the growing Republic. Its humble origins contrasted with its later political power. The Gecko nuclear plant dilemma, where Vault City debates whether to share or hoard energy, was inspired by 1990s energy policy debates in California, where nuclear power was hotly contested. The Operation Anchorage DLC, a simulation of the Chinese invasion of Alaska, was written primarily to let players finally see the famous war only hinted at in lore. It had little to do with the main plot, but satisfied long-time fan curiosity. The settlement building system in Fallout 4 was originally conceived as a side feature. Todd Howard pushed for it to become a core mechanic after seeing how popular mods like Fallout 3's player homes had been. Early prototypes of Fallout Tactics experimented with a first-person mode, years before Bethesda took the franchise in that direction. Developers quickly abandoned it due to technical limitations. The strange talking plants in Fallout 2 were originally meant as a Wild Wasteland-style joke, but were never marked as non-canon. They remain an odd, unexplained piece of Fallout's world. In Fallout 3, super mutants come from Vault 87's FEV experiments. This was Bethesda's retcon to explain their East Coast presence, since previously they were West Coast only. Fans still debate the plausibility of this. The fog-shrouded island of Far Harbor was directly inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth. The cult-like children of Atom in the DLC were a nod to Lovecraft's fish-worshipping cults. Several planned companion quests, including deeper arcs for Arcade Gannon and Veronica, were cut due to time constraints. Obsidian developers later admitted they wished they had more time to flesh them out. Vault 94 was introduced as Fallout 76's first raid-style dungeon, but it was plagued by bugs and performance issues. Bethesda eventually shut it down entirely, making it one of the most short-lived pieces of Fallout content. The Glow Dungeon was deliberately designed to punish unprepared players. Developers wanted it to feel like a survival horror level in the middle of an RPG. Fallout 2 had far fewer animated talking heads than Fallout 1 because the animations ate up too much disk space. Designers prioritized certain characters, leaving most NPCs without them. If the player progresses far enough with Liberty Prime before entering Raven Rock, scripts exist to allow Prime to nuke it entirely. This was cut for stability, but partially restored by modders. Early drafts of Fallout 4 had Kellogg as the main antagonist, with the Institute taking a back seat. Writers later decided he should be a stepping stone villain instead, leading to the Shaun Institute twist. The design of recruitable robots in Fallout Tactics was heavily influenced by the MechWarrior franchise. Developers wanted players to feel like they were commanding a ragtag mercenary force with diverse unit types. The design of recruitable robots in Fallout Tactics was heavily influenced by the MechWarrior franchise. Developers wanted players to feel like they were commanding a ragtag mercenary force with diverse unit types. In Fallout 2, President Tandy's aide carries a Mr. Nixon doll, a direct parody of Richard Nixon. It was a late-night joke quest item poking fun at political scandals. Bethesda designed Fallout 3's DLCs to feel like different genres. Anchorage, being military sim, The Pit, being industrial survival, Broken Steel, being epic continuation, Point Lookout, being horror, and Mothership Zeta, being sci-fi comedy. This was meant to showcase Fallout's tonal flexibility. Settlement defense missions in Fallout 4 were bugged at launch, with enemies often spawning inside walls or missing entirely. Bethesda patched them repeatedly, but never fully fixed the system. Obsidian used real engineering blueprints of Hoover Dam to construct the in-game location, adjusting scale only slightly for gameplay. The Brotherhood of Steel appears in Fallout 76 decades earlier than lore allowed. Bethesda later explained this through Lost Expedition retcons, but fans still debate the continuity break. Originally, the cartoon mascot was Pip-Boy, but to avoid confusion with the wrist computer, designers renamed him Vault Boy. Fans still mix them up. If the Chosen One has very low intelligence, entire dialogue trees change. The dumb dialogue path is so extensive, the developers joked it was like writing a whole second game. Enclave Radio, which only plays patriotic music, was originally going to feature propaganda speeches from President Eden. These were cut due to time, but restored in some mods. The glowing green teleportation effect for the Institute was one of the most complex visual effects Bethesda had made up to that point. It was designed to sell the Institute's technological superiority. In Fallout 76, players can find Nuka-Cola mystery flavor. Bethesda actually ran a real-world version of this, sending out mystery-flavored sodas to influencers without revealing the flavor, blurring the line between the in-game marketing and real-world promotions. And with that, brings us to the end of our collection of Fallout facts. Fallout endures because it refuses to offer easy answers. Beneath the power armor, mutations, and ruined cities lies a deeply human story about fear, ambition, and the cost of survival. Every game asks the same question in a different way. If the world ended tomorrow, would we truly build something better, or repeat the same mistakes all over again? Thank you for listening. We hope you sleep well. Good night.
Good morning, everybody. Actually, I shouldn't say good morning. I should say good afternoon, everybody. But it's kind of morning to me. I had a late night, so I woke up not long ago. This is my morning coffee, at least.
Hello there, and welcome back to Gaming Slumber. War never changes in Fallout, but the wasteland always does. From shattered cities to ruthless raiders and the echoes of a world lost to nuclear fire, today we'll be diving into over 190 obscure Fallout facts to help you drift off and fall asleep. Make sure to leave a comment telling me about your favorite thing to do with Fallout, and also where you're listening from tonight. Now it's time to close your eyes and drift off into the world of Fallout. The Vault Dweller's exile from Vault 13 was secretly orchestrated. In Fallout 1's ending, the Overseer exiles you from Vault 13 despite you saving everyone, explaining that you've changed too much and represent a dangerous influence. This seems like tragic irony, the hero rejected by those they saved. However, examining Fallout 2's lore and cut content from Fallout 1 reveals that the Overseer's decision was actually part of Vault-Tech's original experimental protocol. Vault 13's experiment wasn't just extended isolation, it was testing whether a Vault population could remain sufficiently obedient and controllable after extended isolation that they would exile anyone who brought outside influence, even a savior. The Overseer's private terminals, accessible through hacking in later game versions, reveal he was following standing orders designated as Protocol Cuckoo. If any residents successfully navigated the outside world and returned changed by the experience, they must be permanently removed to prevent contamination of the control group. The Overseer's emotional speech about you changing too much isn't heartfelt regret. It's following a script literally programmed into the Vault doctrine. Most disturbingly, Vault 13's experiment was considered a success by Vault-Tech's surviving records found in Fallout 2. The population did exile their savior exactly as predicted, proving that human communities can be conditioned to reject salvation if it threatens their controlled environment. This recontextualizes the Vault Dweller's founding of Arroyo, not as making the best of a bad situation, but as breaking free from a psychological prison that would have destroyed them if they'd stayed. The tragedy becomes clear. Vault-Tec correctly predicted that people in controlled environments will choose familiar oppression over uncertain freedom, even when freedom is offered by their own heroes. The Gary Vault was actually testing human clone degradation for space travel. Vault 108, infamous for being filled with countless clones all named Gary who can only speak their own name, seems like pure horror comedy. However, the Vault's research terminals reveal this wasn't a random experiment in cloning. It was specifically designed to test whether flash-cloned humans could maintain cognitive function across multiple generations for use as expendable space colonization crews. The pre-war government and Vault-Tec partnered with corporations planning interstellar missions, and they needed to know if they could rapidly produce colonists upon reaching distant planets, rather than keeping thousands alive during century-long voyages. Vault 108's experiment used an accelerated cloning process that could produce a full-grown adult in months, but each successive generation showed increased mental deterioration. The original Gary was a maintenance worker, chosen for his genetic stability, but by generation 54, which is the generation you encounter, the clones have degraded into violent, barely verbal creatures that still somehow recognize each other as family. What's particularly disturbing is that terminal entries show the lead scientist knew the cloning process was flawed by generation 10, but continued the experiment for another 44 generations to collect data on the exact rate of cognitive collapse. The Garys you fight aren't just mindless monsters. They're the 54th echo of a man who died decades ago. Each copy a little more broken than the last, still trying to maintain some form of community even as their humanity slips away. The experiment was deemed a qualified success because it proved cloning could work for short-term colonization, even if the clones eventually became unstable. Fallout 3's Three Dog is broadcasting coded resistance messages. Three Dog, the charismatic DJ of Galaxy News Radio, appears to be a simple wasteland broadcaster, providing entertainment and news. However, careful analysis of his broadcasts reveals he's running a sophisticated information network for the resistance against Enclave and other authoritarian forces. If you listen to his full broadcast cycles across multiple in-game weeks and correlate them with world events, patterns do start to emerge. He provides advanced warnings of Enclave movements disguised as song dedications, uses specific music choices to signal safe routes for escaped slaves, and even his seemingly random commentary contains intelligence about raider movements and resource locations. Terminal entries in the Citadel reveal that Elder Lyons is aware of Three Dog's coded broadcasts and tactically supports them, occasionally feeding him intelligence to disseminate. What's particularly sophisticated is that Three Dog uses a technique called steganography, where the first letter of each song title in a specific broadcast hour spells out short messages. Players have decoded broadcasts that spells things like Enclave DC, warning of Enclave in DC, and Vault Open, indicating safe vault shelters. The reason Three Dog is so insistent you repair his relay tower isn't just about ego or reach. It's because his expanding broadcast range allows him to coordinate resistance efforts across the entire capital wasteland. In cut content, there's a dark alternate ending where if you side with the Enclave, they triangulate his position using his own radio signals and execute him. with the final broadcast being his tortured confession before static. The game even includes a system where Three Dogs stops broadcasting coded messages if you complete certain Enclave-aligned objectives, suggesting he goes deeper underground to avoid detection. The new California Republic is repeating pre-war America's exact mistakes. Throughout Fallout New Vegas, the NCR is presented as the closest thing to the old world United States, complete with bureaucracy, expansionist democracy, and resource struggles. However, environmental storytelling and terminal entries reveal that the NCR isn't just similar to pre-war America. They're making identical mistakes that will lead to identical results. Chief Hanlon's dialogue reveals the NCR is overextended militarily, fighting wars for resources they can't sustain. Camp McCarran terminals show a military-industrial complex emerging, with corporations like the Crimson Caravan and gunrunners lobbying for wars that increase their profits. The sharecropper farms outside Vegas reveal the NCR is experiencing the same water crisis that plagued the pre-war Southwest, and they're responding with the same short-term exploitation strategies. Most damning are terminals in NCR headquarters revealing internal debates about acceptable civilian casualties in their expansion, using the exact same euphemistic language found in pre-war military documents at the switchboard and other locations. President Kimball's route through the Mojave is deliberately designed to mirror President John F. Kennedy's Dallas motorcade, and if you allow his assassination, NCR's response mirrors the authoritarian crackdown that intensified the pre-war government's worst tendencies. The game suggests that the NCR is approximately 15 to 20 years away from the same corporate military fascism that characterized pre-war America, and none of the leadership seems aware of the historical parallels. Caesar's Legion, despite being overtly evil, exists partly to highlight this. Caesar himself points out that the NCR is decadent, overextended, and rotting from within, exactly like late-stage Rome, and also like pre-war America. The tragedy is that the wasteland's best hope for democracy is following a blueprint that already failed once, and no one seems capable of breaking the cycle. Vault-Tec's CEO was already in space when the bombs fell. Throughout the Fallout series, there are scattered references to Project Exodus and mysterious Vault-Tec facilities that don't appear on any map. However, connecting these references reveals something extraordinary. Vault-Tec's executive leadership, including the CEO, had no intention of dying in the nuclear war or living in vaults. Terminal entries in Fallout 76's Vault-Tec University, combined with cut content from Fallout 4's Institute, reveal that Vault-Tec secretly partnered with Poseidon Energy and Robco to construct an orbital station designated Haven 1 that would serve as a refuge for corporate executives and essential personnel. The station was launched in 2077, just months before the Great War, under the cover of a communications satellite deployment. References to Haven 1 appear in the switchboard's intelligence terminals, noting unusual resource allocations to a space-based continuity project. What makes this particularly sinister is that evidence suggests Vault-Tec CEO, whose name is redacted in all documents, watched the Great War from orbit, deliberately delaying evacuation orders to Vault facilities until the last possible moment to ensure maximum data collection from panicking populations. Fallout 76 includes a crashed satellite that, when examined with high science skill, contains fragments of data suggesting Haven 1 remained operational till at least 2087, meaning the executives survived a decade after the war before something went wrong. The satellite's black box contains a final transmission. They knew. They all knew. We told them everything was ready, but we lied. God forgive us, we lied. This suggests the executives ultimately perished, possibly from systems failures, or perhaps from guilt-induced sabotage, leaving behind the vaults full of human experiments, but no corporate masters to collect the results. The supreme irony of Fallout's universe is that the architects of humanity's suffering died alone in space, their grand escape plan failing just as completely as everything else. Deathclaws were originally designed to clear Chinese bunkers. Deathclaws are iconic Fallout monsters, horrifying reptilian predators that rank among the wasteland's deadliest creatures. However, the Deathclaw's origin story is darker than most players realize. According to terminals in Fallout 4's Institute and Fallout 2's Enclave bases, Deathclaws weren't created through random FEV mutation. They were specifically bioengineered before the Great War from Jackson's chameleons as a solution to a tactical problem the US military faced in the resource wars. Chinese forces had created extensive underground bunker networks that were nearly impossible to assault without massive casualties. Conventional weapons couldn't effectively clear the tunnel systems, and soldiers suffered horrific losses in close quarters combat. The military commissioned a biological weapon that could navigate tight spaces, had enhanced aggression and hunting instincts, could operate independently without handlers, and most chillingly, was designed to cause maximum psychological trauma to enemy forces before killing them. The Deathclaw's distinctive horns, terrifying appearance, and tendency to disembowel prey weren't coincidental. They were deliberately engineered to make them as horrifying as possible, so enemy forces would break psychologically before combat even began. The project was called Operation Tantalus, and involved crossing multiple reptile species with genetic material from several mammalian predators, then accelerating their evolution using targeted FEV exposure. The creatures escaped from their containment facility months before the Great War, and sightings were reported across the Southwest, but the military covered up the incidents. After the war, the Enclave found the research and continued breeding Deathclaws, attempting to create intelligent versions that could be controlled. The talking Deathclaws in Fallout 2 represent this second generation of experiments. What makes this especially tragic is that Deathclaws were created to kill Chinese soldiers in underground bunkers, yet they've spent 200 years killing Americans in the underground vaults instead, becoming the very terror weapon America's enemies never successfully deployed. Far Harbor's fog is actually sentient and getting smarter. In Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, the radioactive fog covering the island seems like a natural environmental hazard, the result of nuclear fallout interacting with coastal weather. However, terminal entries in the nucleus and careful observation of fog behavior reveal something far stranger. The fog is a living, evolving organism. The children of Atom aren't entirely wrong in their worship. The fog demonstrates problem-solving behavior, memory, and possibly consciousness. Research terminals in Acadia show that DEMA have been studying the fog for decades and has documented disturbing patterns. The fog learns the layout of structures and returns to them with increasing efficiency. It appears to deliberately target certain individuals while avoiding others. And most unsettling, it seems to coordinate with creatures living within it, suggesting symbiotic intelligence or hive mind behavior. The fog consists of a unique combination of radiation-resistant extremophile bacteria that have formed a colonial superorganism, possibly accelerated by FEV contamination from a pre-war research facility on the island. What makes Far Harbor truly horrifying is that the fog is getting smarter. Comparing historical accounts from old Longfellow's earliest memories to current behavior shows increasing sophistication in how the fog expands, retreats, and also adapts. Unused dialogue from Dima suggests he believes the fog will eventually develop full consciousness, at which point humanity's presence on the island becomes negotiable at best. There's a cut quest line where you could attempt to communicate with the fog using specialized equipment, receiving cryptic responses that suggest it views humans as temporary guests, or perhaps as nutrients. The real horror is that Far Harbor's conflict between the different factions is ultimately meaningless. They're all squabbling over an island that something else is slowly claiming as its own, and none of them realize they're not fighting each other, but fighting to avoid being absorbed by an evolving ecosystem that has already decided humans don't belong there. Fallout 2's Chosen One can become a made man in the mob. In Fallout 2, the Chosen One can complete quests for the various crime families in New Reno, eventually becoming a made man for the Bishops, the Mordinos, the Wrights, or the Salvatores. What most players don't realize is that this isn't just a fun side quest. The canonical Chosen One actually did become deeply involved with New Reno's criminal underworld, and this has consequences for the entire series. Fallout New Vegas contains multiple references, confirming the Chosen One worked with New Reno's families, specifically mentioning their involvement in distributing Jet throughout the wasteland. This is particularly dark because Jet, created by Myron in Fallout 2, becomes one of the most devastating, addictive substances in the post-war world, enslaving thousands to addiction and funding criminal empires for generations. Terminal entries in New Vegas's casinos mention the tribal from Arroyo who have changed everything in New Reno's power structure, and NPCs reference how crime families consolidated power after the incident with the Enclave. What makes this truly morally complex is that helping New Reno's families is often necessary to acquire resources to save Arroyo, meaning the canonical hero of Fallout 2 committed crimes, possibly including murder, drug trafficking, and racketeering to save their village. The game doesn't judge you for this. In fact, it presents it as pragmatic survival. But it means one of Fallout's heroes has a body count of innocent people and contributed to the drug addiction epidemic that plagues the West Coast for the next 40 years. Unused dialogue in Fallout New Vegas included an aged NPC who claimed to have been a child in New Reno when the Chosen One was there, describing them as more terrifying than helpful, and mentioning they disappeared people who got in their way. The Fallout universe's greatest hero against the Enclave was also possibly a mob enforcer, and the games never fully reckon with that moral complexity. In the first Fallout's behind-the-scenes lore, it was actually the Chinese who launched the first nuclear strike. A US violation of a biological weapons treaty provoked them, according to lead designer Tim Kaine. This isn't directly stated in-game, but Kaine confirmed it as part of the internal backstory. China nuked first, then global retaliation followed. This bit of lore adds a darker, political dimension to the world of Fallout. In the design phase of the original Fallout, the vault suits, those iconic jumpsuits with numbers on the back, were conceived to be extruded by a machine to accommodate every body type across generations. The numbers on the backs of the suits were part of that notion. They were, in design intent, a mass-produced product. This neat idea never made it into explicit in-game explanation, but the visual cues do remain. Those fictional sugar bombs in the Fallout universe? Tim Kaine revealed that the concept was inspired by the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes. While sugar bombs first appear in Fallout 3, the idea goes back to the original game's design discussions, even though they didn't make it until later. A sweet little piece of meta pop culture. Before the creators settled on the nuclear wasteland theme, they toyed with more traditional fantasy RPG settings, such as swords and sorcery, and even a time-traveling dinosaurs concept. Eventually, they chose to lean into atomic-era retrofuturism. It's an interesting what might have been for the Fallout series. The original Fallout was designed as a spiritual successor to Wasteland 1988, because the team couldn't secure the rights to a direct sequel. Many of the mechanics, motifs, and tone echo that earlier game. The lineage adds depth for fans who trace RPG history. In the Fallout games, players can tip over Brahmin, the two-headed cattle, in most entries, such as Fallout 2 using a push command, and Fallout 3 and New Vegas by sneaking up and interacting. But that mechanic was conspicuously missing in Fallout 4. A seemingly trivial detail, but one that delights the attentive player. The special targeting system in Fallout 3, being the VATS system, allowing you to target specific body parts in slow motion, was inspired by crash modes in the Burnout racing games, a surprising cross-genre influence. Before Bethesda took over the series, the codename for what would become Fallout 3 was Van Buren, an isometric RPG in the style of the first two games. That version was cancelled, and the franchise shifted to the 3D open-world format we know today. In the Fallout timeline, nuclear bombs fell on the 23rd of October. The year depends on the game, a date that the developers attempted to echo by planning release dates that align. For example, Fallout 3's release date was targeted to coincide with that lore date. The wasteland is full of hidden nods. For example, in Fallout 2, you can find a smashed sperm whale and a pot of petunias, a clear reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In the original Fallout, there's a homage to the TARDIS from Doctor Who. These details reward deep exploration. In Fallout 3, the drug Med-X stands in for morphine, or drugs more broadly. In Australia, the real-world drug connection initially caused issues, so Bethesda changed the name to Med-X globally to avoid regulatory complications. A small change with large implications. In Fallout New Vegas, there's a memorial wall at Boulder City, whose names many assumed were the developers. In fact, they're fictional characters, some of whom tie back to earlier Fallout lore. For example, Roger Weston III is connected to a character from Fallout 2. A subtle nod for lore-obsessed fans. In Fallout New Vegas concept art, The woman pictured in a Vault 34 jumpsuit in marketing wallpapers ended up being the Boomers' leader, Pearl, shown as a young woman. Only later this was revealed, meaning the artwork contained extra lore not obvious at first glance. Interestingly, the very first piece of art created for Fallout 3 in 2004 by lead artist Istvan Peli was the picture of the power armor that would become the game cover. It shows how central the power armor concept was to the identity of the game from early on. While many companions appear in some Fallout titles, the canine companion Dogmeat is arguably the only character to appear in some sort of form across nearly every major entry. That continuity adds a subtle thread of emotional consistency across the wasteland. While it's widely understood that Vault-Tec's vaults were social experiments, in early design documents, there was the notion that vaults were intended to reduce population or filter undesirables in the wake of nuclear war. Some of the atmospheric hints in the game suggest this darker purpose without spelling it out, less openly documented, but widely referenced in dev interviews and also fan lore. In Megatron from Fallout 3, there lies a nuclear bomb at the town center. There's a skeleton underneath that bomb rigging, and if you examine it carefully, the pose suggests the person may have died before the town was built. It's a minor environmental story beat, someone there early. Fans note this, but it's not explicitly narrated. Brahmin, the mutant cattle, are named for pairings of two names. For example, Bessie and Elsie, nodding to the fact that they're two-headed. In Fallout lore, this naming scheme is rarely explained, but you'll see it if you explore minor settlement logs and workbenches. In Fallout New Vegas, the in-fiction soda brand Sunset Sarsaparilla had an ambitious real-world promotional web video that was planned but never fully released. Some of the assets remain in the game files via data mines, but many players don't know about the Cook campaign. In multiple Fallout maps, you'll find bomb craters whose size doesn't match the lore blast radius described in terminals or logs. Some community modders believe this was a level design necessity, but for players, it creates odd visual discontinuities if you pay attention. The Fallout world sometimes uses RADS, radiation absorption dose, and other times uses Roentgens for older measurement. For example, some logs in Fallout 3 refer to Roentgen, despite RADS being the in-game unit. Suggests a shifting standard in the lore technology. Within the lore of certain vaults, unsanctioned experiments took place. Some vaults were intentionally locked and the residents died inside. The game doesn't always show the full documentation, but if you dig into terminal lore, you'll find hints of vaults built simply to be sealed. Many terminals refer to a master record database of Vault-Tec experiments and population statistics. In nearly all games, the actual master record isn't accessible. This creates a sense of mystery, as if huge data was lost in the apocalypse. While super mutants in Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 may look similar, if you examine region-specific logs, you'll find that their genetic origin differs. For example, West Coast mutants resulted from FEV experiments by the Enclave, East Coast in Fallout 3 from different sources. This cross-regional variation is subtle and often overlooked. In the Boomer's B-29 bomber base in Fallout New Vegas, the end slide background artwork includes little Easter eggs. On the side of the bomber, you'll find a small name called Pearl's Pride, referencing the Boomer's leader's earlier name reveal. Fans spotted it years later. In the Fallout setting, many weapons are legacy models from pre-war companies, such as Robco, for example. But in gameplay, you'll find weapons invented just for the game that have no in-law manufacturer. This mismatch is rarely discussed by players, but adds a subtle inconsistency for lore purists. In certain Fallout 3 mods and community findings, players discovered that companions had hidden alternate dialogue lines tied to early build versions of the game, accessible if you reload an older save with changed flags. These lines reference concepts cut before release. For example, alternative motivations. In Fallout 4, the interior model for Vault 88 Industrial Sector appears to reuse assets originally built for a cancelled DLC set piece. The art style slightly mismatches the clean Vault aesthetic, hinting at the change in plan mid-development. The forced evolutionary virus is central to the lore of mutants, but in early design documents, its placeholder name was Project Genesis 2. This old name still exists in some game file comments, though not exposed to players. A community data mine suggests that the large red scorpion creature in New Vegas was originally envisioned as a mid-boss in the cancelled sequel to Fallout Tactics: Brotherhood of Steel, but then repurposed. While not officially confirmed, the matching model names in the files hint at this. In Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, NPCs that seem unique have been found to share the same face rig/model with other minor NPCs, meaning the developers reused assets more than many players assumed. This gives a subtle clone feel if you pay attention, especially on replays of the game. The original Vault Dweller quest in Fallout 1997 is to find a computer chip to fix the water purification system of the Vault. This storyline mirrors real-world Atomic Age fears about infrastructure decay and budget cuts. The developers intentionally crafted this metaphor, though most players just see, "Get the chip." In some early builds of Fallout 3, such as the leak casting script, etc., there was a perk called Archaeologist for giving fully fledged solutions to problems. But in the final game, this was cut or replaced by simpler dialogue choices. In Fallout lore, the company Robco Industries produces the Pit-Boy and lots of robotics. There is an internal in-game memo referencing Tomorrow's Tomorrow, moored like the promise of Disneyland's Tomorrowland. This sort of meta-reference is easy to miss unless you read every terminal. In the Fallout universe, the pre-war calendar uses New Texas Standard in some logs, Capital Calendar in other logs, suggesting that regional governments maintained distinct time zones and calendars even before the war. This subtle detail appears in minor terminals and hasn't been widely documented. The cheerful Vault Boy mascot and his simple animations echo 1950s era civil defense instructional films such as Duck and Cover and Radiation Survival. The development team intentionally referenced those styles to heighten the unsettling contrast between cheerful propaganda and nuclear devastation. There is a lesser-known exploit in New Vegas's Boomer's questline. If you kill the bomb technician, being Pearl's lieutenant, early on, the B-29 bomber remains grounded permanently. The mission changes subtly, and many players don't know this alters late-game outcomes. Some terminals reference bottle crowns, which was a pre-war British-style coin, in regions that we don't typically play in. This is an odd relic of a world design ambition to simulate globally diverse economy, though most players never see those logs. In the lore of Fallout, especially in the first game's terminals, there are references to power armor Mark I prototypes developed in the 22nd century, prior to the Great War. But almost none of that gear survives in-game. It hints at a richer, pre-war military history. A subtle environmental design change was the Mojave Express van near Prim has bullet vantage that lines up with the upper window of the Prim Visitor Center. Level designers placed this intentionally to hint at an earlier boss fight. Many players just see the van, but few notice the alignment. In Fallout 3, the achievement Family Reunion for reuniting with your father initially required an extra dialogue branch in internal builds, which was later cut to simplify branching. Datamine notes show the original condition. The change is invisible to most players, but interesting for completionists. Some NPC names are subtle references. For example, a character named Trinity in a Vault terminal is a nod to the Trinity nuclear test site. The developers peppered these references throughout the games, often in offhand lines. While Brahmin tipping is more widely referenced, in Fallout 2, the push command would knock them over, and they'd slowly get back up. This mechanic was removed in later entries, but it remains a quirky early inclusion. There are music tracks in Fallout 3's files labeled Vault Theme Alt or Radstorm Loop 2 that players discovered via modding tools. They never play during normal gameplay, but they hint at scenes or ambiance the designers may have planned but then cut. The phrase War Never Changes predates Fallout's actual first game release. And though this phrase is strongly associated with Fallout, especially the narration, parts of the team claim the War Never Changes line was part of pre-production design discussions before the first game launched. It became a series signature. The classic "Please stand by" blue screen with the countdown used in loading screens and advertising is derived from fictional Vault-Tec public service announcements that were meant in lore to reassure citizens during the early Bombsfall era. It's an example of meta design bleeding into gameplay. Actor Will Wheaton voices the Robo-Brains in Old World Blues from the Fallout New Vegas DLC. But some Datamine fans have found additional unused lines intended for other Robo-Brain models that didn't appear in the release version. The mission title in Fallout 4, Kid in a Fridge, where you rescue the super mutant child, draws inspiration from the real-world quirky pop culture moments of people hiding in fridges during nuclear blasts, and this was referenced in the Fallout TV show Easter egg discussions. If you explore multiple vaults across Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4, you'll notice the same basic floor plan, from the corridor to the atrium